Hi everyone, this is Tanya with Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as we take a look at background painting with Cicely Mary Barker. This is another one of those projects that I have split into multiple videos. If you want to catch the inking of this, I will have that listed down below. For this video, we're only going to take a look at the background because that's going to take just a little bit of work. And then in our next video, we're going to take a look at painting the little fairy along with the leaves that are in the foreground. So let's get started with getting a nice tint to the paper. I am using the Derwent Inktense Baked Earth pencil. This is an ink-based watercolor pencil, and I know they're not watercolor, but that's what it says on the US box. I am using a very light hand. I've speeded this up so it looks like I'm going pretty hard on there, but it's actually a very light coloring on there. And I'm picking up my wash brush from Winsor Newton. This is their Cotman series. I have a cup of water for the project. I also have on the left hand side my size 8 round Royal Langnickel from their Zen series, my size 6 round Winsor Newton, again from the Cotman series, and my Winsor Newton paints. Now this pan set did not come in this tin. I will have everything listed down below. I simply use this tin because it works best for videos and mixing for you guys. So we are going to go ahead and get a nice wash on that pencil that we put down previously and give the paper a nice tint. If you have not watched my previous fairy videos or when I was taking a look at the Beatrix Potter art, I'm going to link those down below. But what I'm doing is getting a nice tint on the paper to give it an aged look because I'm trying to emulate the style of these ladies. So I want my paper to look aged as their paper looked aged because it was aged. On the screen, you will see that I have listed for you the colors that we will be using for the background. Now we'll add one color later, but I will tell you when we get to that. It's more toward the end. I realized that I needed one more color. You'll notice that I have water already on the palette, and then I put my color on. And if you watch my videos, you know I do that to save product. It helps me to mix it a little bit better. I don't have to keep going back to my cup of water and losing some of the product in the process. So those are our 6 colors we are starting with on the background. And I do have the microfiber cloth. I forgot to mention that earlier. We're going to move the size 6 out of the way. We're going to bring that back in a few minutes. And we're going to start with the size 8 round. The reason I'm starting with that is because some of these areas are kind of large. And this brush from Royal Langnickel holds a little more water than the one from Winsor Newton. Plus, it's a little bit larger. And I want to save that size 6 round for when I'm doing a few more details, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So basically right now, I'm working wet on dry, and I have quite a bit of water in my brush. I mixed the blues up there, the Winsor blue and the ivory black, and when I put it on the paper, I felt like it was a little too blue as compared to hers, but I thought, well, with the yellowing in the background from the pencil we put on earlier, and because this is going to dry a little lighter, I'm going to just leave it. And I'm glad I did because I do like it a little bit brighter on here. So I have a feeling hers was a little bit brighter too when she started. So I'm just getting all of these blue areas in, and what she has done, if you've watched the inking process or if you haven't, let me fill you in on that. You'll notice I have pencil lines in the background that I have not inked in. That's because she inked in the things that were important. The things, well, it's all important, but the things that are in the foreground, the things that she wanted to bring forward. She inked those things to show that they needed to stand out. Things that were in the background, she either left them in pencil or she did not sketch them in at all. She just freehand painted them. If she did use pencil, I really can't see it in my reference photos. And I will have that linked down below as well. If you want to take a look at Cicely Mary Barker's fairies, you can take a look at the whole range of fairies. It was hard to choose because they're all really super cute. But right now I'm just putting blue, and you'll see I hesitate because I'm looking at my reference, trying to make certain that I get the blues in the right areas, because after a while this all kind of blends together. But we're getting getting to the point where I'm going to have to add in some other colors, because up here at the top, she has some leaves that and here it is, we cannot see the lines on them. I can only see the indication of where they are. So they are farther back. By not lining them in like this with pencil, it pushes them even farther back than the ones that she has left the pencil lines on. So the ones that are inked come forward, and then in our middle ground, and it's a background, but it kind of is a middle ground when she puts pencil lines on them. That gives us a middle ground. And when she doesn't have a pencil line at all, that really pushes it to the back and gives us a farther away perspective. Because as we're looking at things close to us are in focus and things behind them are kind of blurred out. So she's done that with her watercolor here, and we are trying to do the same. Now, one way I found that it was a little bit easier to achieve this effect is to use a medium amount of water on my brush. When I started out, I used quite a bit because I wanted to push that blue around and I wanted to thin it out just a little bit and knock back the vibrancy of it, but I wasn't mixing anything together. Now I'm wanting colors to not just juxtaposition together, but I want them to slightly mix to give that blurred effect. So you can see I'm not letting it dry, but yet the colors aren't completely bleeding into one another. They're kind of stopping there and have a little bit of a blurred edge, but they're not completely running over. So I have dry paper and a wet brush, but a medium wet brush is what allows me to do that. I'm going to do the same process as I get to the pencil lines. I still want them to be a little more distinct, but I'm wanting them to have a slightly blurred edge. But we can see the pencil lines. So even if they blur outside of that, that's okay in watercolor, but that's also going to give us a little more definition having the pencil lines. So I'm going to be quiet here and just let you watch me work for a bit, and then I'll hop back on in just a second once we get this first layer completely finished. You may have noticed that I am skipping around in these areas, and that is for multiple reasons. First of all, I'm working on a larger size than what I normally have. If you've seen my videos, you know I like to work small, but this one I felt I wanted to do the whole picture, so I made it a little bit larger, and I'll measure that and put that down below. Right now, voicing over off the top of my head, I can't remember. It was a little smaller than an 8 by 10, but it was larger than what I normally do. You know, I like postcard size. So having it a little bit larger like this and using the technique I'm using, I have to kind of think, how am I going to lay this down? Because we don't want our paint to dry. I'm not using a lot of water on my brush, but as you can see, this area is quite large and I need to cover it quickly. So I'm having to put the blue down, and I'm running out of blue. You can't see that at the top, but I can see it from my vantage point. So I'm having to add a little more water to it and move very quickly, really quickly for me, and try to go ahead and get all of this area in. And then I'm going to skip back up and start working on the leaves. So here we go with the leaves. I did the ones at the top, the ones that I just finished, the ones kind of over to the left, up just a little bit, because I knew they had a good edge, and I was going to be painting some darker colors next to them in my second layer that needed to stand out. So if they didn't have a nice blurred edge, that was okay with me, but these needed to have a nice blurred edge. So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and bring the blue down and then work back up. So there really is, I guess, a method to my madness here on this. Thankfully, these little leaves were all the same base color, and then I could come back and drop in the areas that I needed to and kind of let them blend together. So we're almost done with this part, and I'm going to let it dry for a little bit, not a long period of time. It's not going to be bone dry, but I am going to let it dry enough so that if I come back and put water on top of it, I'm not going to get that ballooning effect. And that's why I wanted to do that blue and then work backwards, because if you've worked with watercolor much, you know, if you don't let it dry completely and you're trying to put another wet color beside it, you're just going to get that wet color, especially if you're using a lot of water on your brush. That wet color is just going to bleed right over into the dry color, the color that's drying. So I'm using a medium amount, but as I'm coming back and doing this second layer, I'm not going to have as much water. So I didn't have to let it dry till it's bone dry. I could go ahead and let it be just slightly damp and then come back on with the other color. I'm using a little technique right here that I learned with Beatrix Potter, and we also see it with Cicely Mary Barker, and that is dropping one color in onto another wet color and letting them bleed together. So you'll see that a little bit throughout this piece. I am switching over to my size 6 round. Remember, it's not going to hold as much water. I'm not going to be putting a lot of water on my brush because this is slightly damp. It's not completely dry, but I'm starting at the top because that's had longer to dry. And what you don't see off camera is that I work in front of a window, and my window is open, and it is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit in Arkansas when I was painting on this, so it will dry fairly quickly the closer to the window it is. So I'm using a little more paint on my brush, a little less water. It's not what I like to call syrupy, but it does have less water. And here is that other color I'm bringing out, the Winsor Lemon, because it is a bright yellow. I looked at my colors, and I looked at hers, and I realized, you know, these need to be a bit brighter. So instead of mixing another green, I'm simply going to layer a green on top, or a yellow on top of the green, I should say. And that's going to give us a different look to our greens. And that's the wonderful thing about watercolor, because they're transparent. You can get away with that. If you don't have the right shade, just drop a color on top that gives you exactly what you need. This area had a lot of shadow in it, so you're going to see me coming back and forth and adding these colors back in. I wanted to brighten them up just a bit, and these are the same colors I'm putting on top, and that is the same cadmium-free red that I'm using, but the colors that I'm putting it on, the areas where I'm putting it on, those have already dried. I'm using less water, and it's brightening up the color. So I'm going to keep on with this process, and I'm going to hop back on in just a second. Just so you'll know how many times I reach over and tap my microfiber cloth, I thought I would give you a wider view. So it's the same process, and you've seen this up close. I hated to pull away, but I wanted you to see how many times I tap my brush, and I wanted you to notice I'm not always going to the water when I change color. I will paint a little bit, tap it, now I've got the yellow, and I'm coming back in. Only when it's not spreading well do I go to the water. And then I take most of that water off my brush because I don't want a lot of water on this area. Now, some areas you'll see me, like this one, tap just a little bit more water in there to touch it up because it needed to have a little bit more blend out. And I needed to add another color in next to it to allow it to bleed together. So that's what you're seeing here. And I thought having the camera pulled back so you could see the entire set there, you would know how many times I reach over and touch that cloth and just see the entire process as far as this detail layer goes. Now, believe it or not, we're only going to do 2 layers on this background, but I didn't want to do some of the background one layer and then come forward and then go back to the background again. So that's why I decided to put the background as a video all unto itself.
Just a few more paint strokes and all of these details will be finished. And I do apologize because in the lower left-hand corner, I know with the camera pulled back, my head keeps getting in the shot. So I do apologize that you have to look at the top of my head. I can't exactly see from my vantage point, and I always lean over and my head always gets in the shot, and I just couldn't edit it out of this. So I do apologize. You're having to look at the top of my head, but I do appreciate you being here so very much. I'm always happy when you guys show up and leave me comments. And if you have any questions, put those down there. And if you have any advice, put that down there. Tell me if you have any experience following along with the work on these ladies. I would love to hear. I am going to have part 2 on this. I'm going to call it part 2 because really the color is in 2 parts. And I will finish it up in the next video. Hopefully that will be out within the next week. I hope you will join me. I'll put all the links down below. I appreciate your being here, and I will see you in the next one.